Today we are discussing group dynamics. Groups are dynamic entities. This is directly from your text. Groups are dynamic entities that have a direct and indirect impact on their members. This was first stated in 1959, and even the process of exploring group dynamics goes back even further. We're going to touch on some of that in just a moment. But dynamics are very, very powerful. Within the dynamics and the connections to each other, that's where the true work of the counseling happens. In your text, this chapter, chapter 2, opens with a segment from an earlier gliding text, Group Dynamics. And it talks about how emotions are flying around the room. Someone's disclosed something, a group member has disclosed something. And there's a strong atmosphere of trust. Within that, following this disclosure, the emotions that are bouncing around from the other members and the feelings and connections that are happening, within that, what gliding sees is change and process and progress. And this is where the power of group counseling lies, within those connections and the process and the dynamics of the group. Today we're going to explore those dynamics. And what it starts with is group affiliation. Group affiliation is a complex and impactful component of the group process. What we know is that groups exert differing levels of pressure and impact on individuals. It's based in part on how the individual affiliates with the group. Like, how connected are you to the group? How do you affiliate with the group? Primary affiliation groups are direct, face-to-face. They're relatively permanent and intimate. These were first studied in sociology years and years ago. And they could include family, peer groups, spiritual community, crisis support groups, groups that you're tightly connected to. They're intimate connections. And they're relatively permanent. They're long-standing. Your secondary affiliation groups are more impersonal, more temporary and goal-oriented. They have weaker emotional ties. This may include sports teams, classes, or work groups. And within these primary and secondary affiliations, you have differing levels of social influence. And this is an important component of group connections, and it alters actions, attitudes, and feelings. Groups formed in group counseling kind of bridge these. Now, certain groups, task work groups, they could be secondary affiliation groups, right? So any group could fall clearly into one or the other. But oftentimes what you find is that they kind of bridge the two, that they are intimate, they have a set amount of time, that they're a span of connection and time together, right? They're direct and face-to-face, share a lot of emotional connection and support, you share a lot of information with each other. And they probably trend more closely to primary affiliation groups. But within any one group composition, there could be components that move the group further along the continuum towards the secondary affiliation. There's some holding back there. So groups formed in group counseling can really bridge either of these categories or fall into either one completely. Back in 1945, we're conducting a study of productivity and group influence, or workplace environment, group influence and productivity at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company. There's an error there. Pardon me. During that time, they determined that social factors emerged as impacting work groups more than physical factors. This led to our utilization of the term the Hawthorne effect, that human subjects, they change their behavior due to being observed. During this time, this emergence of a focus on group dynamics, the impact and influence that individuals exert on one another within a group and within the capacity of a group, is first emerged as a critical component of understanding how social influence works, how dynamics works, and the value of the group as a vehicle for change. Lewin in 1948 first used the term group dynamics. So it was first used in 1948. And he explored how climate and processes influenced interactions and outcomes within the group. So we've been looking at group dynamics for a long time. Group dynamics matter, and they're heavily influential. But we didn't, until the point that we started to really explore that impact and the power of the dynamics and processing, we hadn't fully tapped into how valuable groups can be as a vehicle for change and growth. Within group dynamics, there are two central components: content and process. Content really includes information, words, ideas, information. Group process, that's the heart of your interactions. It's the interactions of group members with one another. There's 7 types of process that occur most frequently in groups. Contagion, which is when a group member's behavior elicits group interaction. So one group member has an interjection, a sharing, a point of information that is shared, some connecting point, and other group members through that connecting point have their own impacts and interjections in the group. So one person's behavior, one group member's behavior elicits that group interaction. Another type of process is in conflict. And matters involving conflict, as your text says, usually revolve around significant issues in people's lives. That may include authority, intimacy, growth, change, autonomy, power, and loss. Some of those components will relate right back to the primary, the family of origin and the experiences of the individual growing. But conflict, what we know is that the process of conflict as a process within group most typically revolves around very significant issues in people's lives. Anxiety, the tension involved in anxiety and the uneasy feelings that go with it, as mentioned in your text, are universal. People bring anxiety to group, and there's discomfort that arises when certain members share certain information or feelings. And what we see is that when this anxiety arises and these emotions arise, typical group members typically employ one of 2 strategies. And the first would be a restrictive solution. They try to change that subject. They don't want to, if something is an anxiety-producing topic, they change the subject. They don't want to focus on that. And a healthier strategy is to employ enabling solutions and discussion about the anxiety that is present. When this anxiety arises and is apparent within the group process, then this anxiety can be a mobilizer of the process. If you address it, you face it openly and honestly, and you allow an opportunity for discussion within the group. Consensual validation, that involves checking one's behaviors within the group, with the group of others. In this sort of interaction, people are questioned or confronted, and they're either affirmed individually or within the group, right? They're looking for that affirmation. So consensual validation. They put something out there and they're looking for affirmation from other group members. Universality, sometimes we think about this as normalizing within counseling. It's very similar to normalizing. And when an individual of the group shares something and it's obvious that others within the group have had similar experiences and feelings, this process helps people feel more connected to the group, engaged with each other, and reach deeper levels of cohesion sometimes. Family reenactment. Families of origin are powerful in our lives. And so within the group, and we're going to talk about this a couple of times throughout this presentation, but within a group, family reenactment, there are times that certain group members are going to seem to fulfill for other group members roles that are consistent with their roles within their family of origin. So they could be that they have more difficulty relating to someone because of some difficulties in their life from a family of origin member who's similar to that person, has similar characteristics. And these pieces, this within the process, the thing about family and reenactment as part of the process of group dynamics, those issues that have not been resolved can be brought forward into the group, and within the group there can be some work as a group for the individuals to help them resolve those situations for themselves. Installation of hope. When you're able to foster a sense of hope and connection in a group, when you create an environment with your group that encourages group members to tap into hope, to react with hope, and connect with other group members around this element of hope, then through that process, all group members come to realize that what they're facing, that's resolvable. They can move through this challenge into a place of progress and success and successful outcomes for themselves. So these 7 types of processes occur most frequently in groups, and they all are powerful and can be attended to, utilized, and leveraged by the counselor for positive change within the group. You have to achieve a balance between content and process. On that last slide, back to that last slide, content looks kind of shallow here, right? The process looks really deep. Well, what we know is that the appropriate balance between content and process is absolutely necessary for good change, growth, and progress within the group. Group leaders can use two sets of questions to guide that interplay between content and process. Content questions, they can include, what do we have to do? What do we need to do to accomplish our goals? While process questions center more on, who am I? Who am I with you? Who are we together? Those interpersonal dimensions of the group. And these interpersonal dimensions, they take on increased importance as you work towards your objectives. So when we see this, like this warm-up, who am I? Who am I with you? Is the purpose clear? You see some shift with content, some of the process, then you shift into action. Like, who are we together? Are all matters related to content represented? And then that closure. What outcomes resulted from the group experience? We have that balanced process of content and process, the balanced structure of content and process, then we're able to encourage the group to move through group sessions and group interactions, group activities in ways that increase cohesion, increase understanding and introspection, and work towards clear objectives and content around areas of content. Groups can have some challenges with achieving this balance. It's perfectly reasonable to expect that you will work with groups that at times you'll have difficulties achieving this sort of balance, right? This looks nice, it's clean and neat, but there are times that it's difficult to achieve that. Well, there were a couple of examples shared in your text that were particularly useful. There was one example that a group could begin with an over-focus on process. And this kind of group, an experiential activity that doesn't tie in with the rest of the group session, can get members very emotionally involved. They can really connect with each other, but there's no clear sense of how it's relating to the overall objectives of the group. And the power's not in the process without attention to content, and context and plans for the group, the structure and objectives of the group. The power is in attending to process and utilizing process in such a way that achieves that balance between growth and movement, awareness of content, and work towards the cohesion that gives you the strength to make growth in those areas of content. Otherwise, a converse example is in a content-dominated group. Process is inhibited. Group members may not identify as a group. They're focused more on just individual progress towards towards the objective or objectives. And if they don't achieve that strong group cohesion and connection, then it limits their sense of being connected to the group. It limits the strength of the connection as a point for encouraging growth and development across the areas of content and objectives. And people withdraw physically, mentally from the group because they didn't feel connected initially to the group. Achieving that balance is critical. It takes experience, and it takes attention to being, the very intentional awareness of an effort, making that effort to achieve the balance between content and process. So you think, have we got clear objectives? Is it clear how we're going to work towards those objectives? Are we attending to the objectives throughout? Are we using activities that are not too process heavy, that they don't attend to content, or they're not designed in such a way that aligns the activity with the content? And are we doing a good job of attending to process? Because process, that's the heart, that's the power, and because it's what forms the group. We talked about last time how structure can emerge, or structure is going to emerge. But if you do a good job of connecting individuals, then the structure that emerges will be very cohesive, they'll be connected, and the dynamics of the group will encourage change and growth of individual members. When you think about the group, the group's a system. Systemic theory will help you understand this, like from your family systems course that you take, or other systems theories modules within the counseling theories course. But the group's a system. It has the group leader, it has the members, and the group itself as a whole is a component that must be considered. Each element in the system is impacted by whatever's happening in any other element. And like we know from systems theory, a system is as strong as its weakest part, right? But the system is also greater than the sum of its parts. They all connect together. So you have to attend to each, and how do they impact each other? And what are the important points for the system to remember in terms of being healthy and productive, or as a group leader to attend to with this system to help the system be healthy and productive? your group is very, very strong, but as a group leader, you haven't been conscious of your position within the group as the leader and the impacts that you are able to initiate within the group because of that role, then you're less able to move the group from point A to point B, encourage the group to move from point A to point B. Each component of the system brings power to the system. It's power for movement within the system, growth within the system. And each component of the system has to be attended to. And we have to remember that as we attend to any one part, it's impacting the other parts, right? So that's the piece about the system's focus that you definitely want to take away. Successful groups, though, are able to engage in, and group leaders who are successful are able to facilitate a process of differentiating self, attending to individual needs, and integrating with others, doing things with and for others. If you want to influence your group dynamics, if you want your group to be as strong as possible, you want to encourage each member to be able to do this, to differentiate self and understand what he or she needs from this group and what he or she expects from his or her affiliation with the group, the depth of affiliation and connection, differentiating self. And also you want to encourage that individual, each individual, to be able to integrate with others, to do things with and for the others, and recognize that they are part of this larger group system. And that the group itself is a component, a system that influences how they grow individually. Successful groups and successful group leaders are able to do this and encourage it for the members. When you look at group dynamics and you think how you plan to influence group dynamics, there are 5 main areas. When you're working to influence dynamics, group dynamics, you can influence group dynamics through pre-planning, structure, exercises, interactions, and roles. Now, within any of these components, these are according to Gladding, right? Your author's text, the author of your text. But with any of these components, there are other pieces you would consider. Within pre-planning, you will think of all of these pieces. These are all part of it, and at different points, with different groups, different pieces will need to be attended to more heavily than others, right? But the clarity of purpose, is it clear to group members? Have you made it clear? Have you considered in your own pre-planning, what is the purpose of this group? Is it relevant and meaningful for all members? And are you able to engage with members around this purpose in a way that encourages growth and personal development? What's the setting? What's the physical setting? What's the environment? How is this going to impact your group being able to engage with each other? If you're in a situation where you're planning, like if you get down to these exercises and you think they're going to be heavily in one avenue, but you've got a setting that doesn't allow that, then you haven't done a good job with your pre-planning, right? We want to think about that. With your pre-planning, what setting matters for this group in terms of influencing positively the interactions of the group. The third pre-planning factor is time. Time. You don't want your sessions to be too long or too short. You don't want people to lose interest, but you want to give them time to warm up and get engaged with each other before you move into the heavy lifting, right? So you have to think, what's the appropriate balance and the appropriate time for this session for this group? Consider the developmental levels of your group members, consider your topic, consider your setting, how does it fit? How do the components fit together? And what is going to allow you to do the best job of influencing and promoting individual growth and change and the group's cohesion and connection together. Membership. Membership's another component that you must consider. And with membership, you'll think, how do we carefully attend to the size of the group, the potential of group members to subgroup together, their level of commitment to the group, or external pressures that they may feel for having to be engaged in the group. Demographic components, are they composed of people who are share very similar backgrounds or very dissimilar backgrounds? They have what brings this group together, and what components of membership are most important for you to consider. Every group will be a little different in this area, and takes attention on the part of the group leader in pre-planning to make sure you've got a group composition that's going to be effective. Then as you set goals, what are the expected or the planned outcomes for your group? Commitment. Are they attending voluntarily? Are they mandated to attend? What does that mean for how they'll engage with each other? And how can you encourage active engagement and connection. Openness, how open do you think group members will be to novel ideas and actions? And you'll go back here for this piece, you'll think membership, you'll think about commitment, you think about time and how you're able to encourage openness, right? Risk-taking, another factor that you must consider is like how active are people and comfortable will people be with engaging in new thoughts and new behaviors? And are there any other risks that need to be considered as you plan your group? And then attitudes. How do members and leaders perceive tasks and perceive others in the group? What are the attitudes of the group members? This and commitment are connected pretty closely. All of these last four are pretty closely connected to membership and what the group members bring to the group, to their engagement with the group. And all of these need to be considered with pre-planning. Another way you can influence group dynamics as a group leader, group facilitators, through the structure, both physical and interactional. You can think all of these structures are described heavily in your text, and you can consider which one seems to be the best fit. With a circle something you often see, right? It implies equality and status and power, because everyone's sitting in a circle. The group leader's also in the circle. Everyone is together. Sometimes it can be difficult for your role as the leader to be most clear in the circle structure because you're on the same level as group members. But an active and engaged, skilled group leader can handle that perfectly well. You can manage that and make good connections across members. In a chain arrangement, what you would see is that people are positioned or seated, within the group like along a line. And it could be according to their rank in the group. Communication in this way is passed through others from a person at one end to the other end. This is popular for some group organizations, but for counseling, you may have heard of the chain of command like for the military, but in counseling you're going to see this version less often, right? The wheel arrangement, in contrast to the chain, is it has a center spoke, right? The leader sits in the center. And this enables face-to-face interaction with all members as you're turning, as you rotate around, But it can be very difficult and frustrating for group members who feel like they have to communicate to other group members through the leader. So for much of your group counseling, what you'll see is the circle. You'll see more of the circle. Now the theater, where people are seated in like lines and rows, and the leaders at the front. This you would see for many psychoeducational groups, right? You see it in classrooms. You've been pretty familiar with that. A third way you can influence group dynamics through exercises. And so you can influence, when you think about exercises and influencing group dynamics, exercises are very beneficial if they're promoting a positive atmosphere in the group. And they do promote a positive atmosphere when the leader is skilled, thoughtful, and intentional with the process. So you can generate discussion and participation, stimulates members' energy levels. They feel more engaged in the process. It alleviates some anxiety and stress. People can shift into the action, and shifting into that action frees up space to discuss emotion that without that freed up space, they feel more anxious sharing with others. These exercises can be designed to help the group really focus clearly on a particular topic or issue. It's certainly true in task groups. It can shift the group focus from one area to another. This is really useful for metaphor, and they can promote experiential learning. They increase the comfort level of participants when done well. They help them relax and have fun. And a skilled leader is able to use exercises to shift, foster insight through the processing that happens, that connects what they learn through the activity to what we hope to achieve content-wise and objective-wise for the group. Verbal intrapersonals, low-intensity verbal intrapersonal exercise might be having group members draw pictures of how they perceive the world and use these pictures to introduce themselves to the group. There are examples for each of these: interpersonal, nonverbal intrapersonal, and nonverbal interpersonal, all in your text. And you can share those. You can explore those when you have an opportunity. Interactions and roles are the final two ways that group leaders can seek to facilitate group dynamics. What we know about group interactions are that they are the ways that members relate to one another. And they really exist along a continuum of connection and verbal and nonverbal. They can be from Group interactions along that continuum can be extremely non-directive, or they can be very highly directive, right? They can be very structured and planned and directive on the part of the leader. The type of group interaction as well as its frequency makes a difference in how the group, or rather the group, develops, right? Nonverbal behaviors are important to consider. What we know is that 50% of the messages communicated in social relationships are typically communicated through nonverbal behaviors. The four main categories of nonverbal behaviors are body behaviors, interaction with the environment, speech, and physical appearance, right? Group leaders and other members have a lot of nonverbals to attend to, and it's complex. The process is complex. And then on top of that, you've got your verbal behavior, like what's being shared. And within all of these interactions, group members are attending to it just as are group leaders. So you can take away your own ideas of the interactions and what they mean and how you perceive them, but the inferences you make from them, but each of the group members are also taking theirs away. You should also be aware that each group member is taking theirs away, their own inferences away, and you can consider how that can be utilized as a leader to influence the group dynamics. Within your text, you'll find a table that shares behaviors that are frequently associated with various group member states. That's really, really useful to consider, and you should check it out as you're doing leading your group counseling in the class, so you can be conscious of those behaviors yourself. Then roles. Roles are a final way of influencing group dynamics. You have facilitated building roles, roles that are focused on connecting. You have maintenance roles that are just focused on maintaining, they contribute to the social emotional bonding of members, but they really focus on maintaining those relationships. And then you've got blocking roles. Blocking are essentially, as your text says, an anti-group role. Individuals who take on this role, they act as aggressors, blockers, dominators, recognition seekers, all of these pieces. They can perceive themselves as outsiders, and they put themselves outside the group. What we know is that hardly anyone falls into just one of these roles all the time. A person who's a great facilitator and fulfills a building role when faced with certain topics or things that touch on certain challenges within themselves may shift into a blocking role. And as a group leader, you've got to use these roles, you've got to be aware of these roles and work to intentionally utilize people's interactions in these roles to encourage growth and influence the dynamics positively for the group. There are some challenges within the roles: collision, incompatibility, confusion, transition. All of these present challenges for group members, and group leaders must be aware of that and attend to it appropriately. There are many variables that have effects on group dynamics. Many of these align clearly with, let me just go back to where we were before. When you think about the process, different 7 types of process, those 7 types of process align with these variables that impact group dynamics. Variables that have a positive impact is just like we mentioned before, the installation of hope, connection, universality. We're all in this together, and what I'm experiencing is not so far out of the norm of what other people have experienced. Sharing information, helping people restructure those primary family groups, their feelings about their roles in primary family groups and the roles of other members. And then each of these others can be used to very positive effect in terms of positively influencing group dynamics as well. When we try to avoid conflict or shift away group responsibilities, if we ignore contradictions within the group, or if we have a group that becomes very narcissistic, or if we just become so numb, there's so much shared in the group that we just become numb to it, to the experience and the emotion, then these have a negative effect on our group dynamics. And as a group leader, you have to be conscious of that as well. The way to best understand group dynamics is through videotaping, allowing group members to journal, and because it gives you a richer experience. For a group leader, when you read the journaling or when you engage with the group members around this journaling, then you gain insight into their experience and how they are processing their experiences and perceiving their experiences. Outdoor experiences shift people out of their comfort zone. We're going to spend some time talking about that in our class as well. Team building, these two are very similar, can be very similar. And shifting people out of their comfort zone for encouraging cohesion through connecting the group around achieving certain outcomes that can be external, maybe external to their overall content focus, but critical for building that initial cohesion. And all of these components can help them integrate what they're doing and how they're growing as a group into individual growth and development for themselves around the topics of focus. The PARS model, when we think about processing, so you've got all of the dynamics in play, there's a lot going on, content's being shared, the dynamics are in play, you're utilizing activities and opportunities for group members to engage together. Processing is critically important, and the PARS model gives you an avenue for conducting that processing. The PARS model is Dr. Glass's model. It's one that he and Dr. Benshoff, James Benshoff, developed together. It's widely used for effective processing and group counseling, and it includes a multi-step process focused on reflecting, understanding, and applying. And it occurs within the activities, the relationships, and the self. We're going to talk about the PARS model in depth in one module in the class, but I wanted to introduce it because it's an important module. It's an important component of understanding how to do good processing that you can begin to utilize now as you shift into conducting the group counseling that you'll be doing as the group counseling experience for the class. Dr. Glass will likely discuss this with you at an opportunity that he has to engage with our class, and like I said, we will be discussing it in a full module as well. The stages of reflecting, understanding, and applying build on one another and connect to one another. In reflecting, individuals retrace the steps of a particular activity, and then they ask, what did we do? What did we do? The individual may reflect with the counselor, group members may reflect with one another and with the leader. If you're working with a family, they reflect together. But what do we do? In that understanding stage, as they shift into the understanding stage, the focus is on helping participants discuss specific interactions, as well as offering explanations and interpretations of what occurred. And then as we shift from there into applying, we're applying what we learned. So what do we do? What do we learn? And then how do we apply that to what we're doing in our everyday lives, and our relationships, and in our connections with others? The PARS model is very useful for counselors in working in groups, and there are opportunities that you will have to engage in some structured processing using the PARS model in our class. Group dynamics are complex. There's a lot to cover. This is a chapter of your text, chapter 2. It's critically important. As you consider group dynamics, consider how complex it will be for you as an individual, as a group leader, to sit with the group and try to attend to that balance that we mentioned before, the balance of content and processing. How will you be careful to gather information and to allow the flow of information through the surface, through the content, while attending to the movement and the depths underneath that processing? And how are you going to do that? And what strengths do you have that you bring to that? If you're a person who's readily able to tap into the emotional climate and tenor of a room, that's great. That's going to be a help to you with processing. But if you're a person who struggles with that, you will likely have other strengths that will help you with processing. You may be a person who's very good at connecting pieces of information quickly. That helps with processing. Any of us can become skilled with managing processing and facilitating dynamics within our group that move to positive growth for the group and cohesion. And we're going to have opportunities within this class to practice that, discuss it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how each of you engage with attending to dynamics as you lead the groups for the group counseling experience.